it's been a couple days since the halftime show, since Benito Bowl. Apparently, people say that it was a very boring football game. I wouldn't know. I'm not into football like that. But I was in California during the Super Bowl, and I was trying my best to watch the halftime show. I caught it live in real time. It was really great. And then after the fact, I watched it on my phone on the plane. And then I came home and I watched it on a bigger screen to take it all in. So I had to really pay attention to all of the details that maybe I missed, maybe I didn't, just the hoopla. But I had the enormous privilege of being able to see everybody's reaction. And I have thoughts because I feel like an old head. I feel like just an old dude whenever I say things like this. Even though, to be fair, even whenever I was younger, I would say things like this all the time, and people would call me too conscious and I was, I'm overdoing it or blah, blah, blah. But given where we have landed as a country, I think in hindsight, maybe we should have paid more attention to the people that wanted to shed some light into the consciousness of society. But I digress. That's for another conversation. Here are my thoughts initially. I thought the Super Bowl was great. Rewind. I thought that the Super Bowl halftime show was great. I thought it was great. I thought that Bad Bunny did a great job. I thought it was very symbolic and very visual. Shout out to the production team, because that entire production to get set up that quickly was incredible. I think that's what I'm realizing over the past 5 Super Bowl halftime shows. I think maybe starting from COVID, that the production team is the real MVP. I mean, for real. How they're getting the set production, lighting, camera, the camera crew. I run this setup, and it can be cumbersome and ridiculous sometimes. So I think about a lot of moving parts that are happening in that kind of environment. So I say to myself, that production was bananas, right? The real MVP, the production team, amazing. Secondly, I thought that the halftime show really is primarily for television. It's not really designed for the viewer in the stadium, right? They're going to be looking at it from the Jumbotron, and that's adorable. That's great. That's so cool. You get to watch it from a distance on the field, but it really isn't for you. So for at least if you're not going to get everything that it's supposed to be through just watching the field, right? I think that's important to note. And I think the NFL does that on purpose. I think the NFL is captivating. I mean, think back to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Springsteen, Prince. Those halftime shows were supposed to be for the crowd in the moment, more like a concert type of a performance. And then even Justin Timberlake in Minneapolis, whenever he did that Prince tribute, all of those are concert adjacent. You would see that at a concert. If you go to their shows, you'd be able to see something similar to that. And then I think now the halftime shows are really dedicated, to the viewer at home. The NFL is making a huge effort to try to captivate people sitting in their couches, more so than the people that already bought the ticket for the function at the game, right? So I think that's an important distinction. So for all the videos that I see where it's the people in the stands weren't having fun or weren't whatever, I think that's a really tone deaf analysis. But I just don't think it makes the substantive point that people are trying to make whenever they say that it wasn't entertaining. So that was my initial thoughts. I don't think it was the best Super Bowl ever. I do think it was incredibly symbolic, and I feel very proud to be Latino. And I feel I was so giddy to see a lot of that representation, to see the Afro Latinos, to see the bodegas, the New York esque feel. I think what it means to be Puerto Rican is really predicated on the island itself and how it is on the island, which I think he shed light on with the symbolism of the electricity and the sugar canes and all that stuff was just incredible. I also think how Puerto Ricans relate to being in the States is also a very important part of it, right? So culture and that kind of spread through all Latino culture. When my dude got woken up at the wedding, I mean, that was a core memory. I think there's pictures of me at somebody's wedding where I'm dead asleep and my folks or my parents are dancing in the back, and it is like a magical experience. Sorry, not a magical experience. It is a like core memory, like one of the earliest memories that I have, or it's either that or quinceañera, and so I think it tugs at the Latino experience in that sense. And then because there is such a huge cultural force of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans in New York City specifically, he played Nueva York on there, and that's one of my favorite songs on the album. He also played Baile Inolvidable, which is my favorite song. I think the best song on the album. So I really enjoyed that, like the filtering through the Puerto Rican experiences and the Latino culture at large. Of course, I felt seen with that. I felt incredible. I thought it was an incredible look for a little bit of history. Lo que pasó en Hawaii, like that. It was an incredible, important song. And it's inherently a political song about American colonialism. So I think it was very, very, very poignant and incredible. I think Bad Bunny is incredibly brave and smart to be able to put that at the forefront. All of this happening at the forefront of him winning Album of the Year at the Grammys, which I think feels very intentional. I mean, it's such a one. It's a shout out to Bad Bunny and the incredible month that he's having. But also, I just felt very proud. Now, I can do both things. I can compartmentalize. I can both say that I felt really proud to be Latino and I felt really seen, and salsa at the Super Bowl makes me feel so, I mean, it just makes me feel so incredible and powerful, and I love the fact that a big piece of Latin culture is being highlighted. But then I can also say that it might have not been, I'm not going to clock that as the best Super Bowl halftime show ever, which leads me to my next point. This is where I start to feel old. I have gotten caught up in a little bit of the echo chamber online. And I had to ask myself, going back, like 30,000 foot view, why are we even trying to find the best Super Bowl halftime show, period? Like, why is that a conversation, right? The Super Bowl being the last game of the NFL season or the NFL playoff season or whatever the hell it is, right? It's a spectacle. It's big. It's you can say it's an American tradition, whatever, right? Why is there this competition between the NFL's own performances? When I ask myself that question, it starts to feel very kind of silly. It feels a little corny to be able to say this Super Bowl halftime show. No, but Rihanna's. No, but Bruno's. No, but Beyonce's. No, but Bruce Springsteen. No, but Prince. Like I'm failing to see the benefit and or the bragging rights that anybody should have when it comes to winning or figuring out some objective reality or truth about the best halftime show. All it does to me is anticipate next year's halftime show, and that's great for the NFL as a money-making organization. I don't know why it matters past that. And I'll get into that a little bit more because I have more to say specifically about this year's halftime show because of all the hoopla. But I just started asking myself that question. I don't know why that matters. I don't know why finding the best Super Bowl halftime show matters at all. And what the point is of arguing which one was better than what. You can argue about which one, you can say which one was your favorite. I'm partial to Prince. I'm a huge Prince stan. So I am partial to Prince, right? But I mean, I love Bad Bunny's. I think Kendrick Lamar's was incredible, right? That being said, I think in relation to the echo chambers that are happening online, the internet talk. We also had an alternative halftime show, right? We had the Turning Point USA halftime show, which I will start by saying was not an actual halftime show. Like, by definition, you providing a show the day of the Super Bowl at the same time that the Super Bowl halftime show is happening does not a halftime show make. The only way you can have an alternative halftime show, legitimately speaking, is if the NFL itself makes an alternative halftime show. If you make a production, even if at whatever level you want, the day of the Super Bowl, at the exact same time as a halftime show, even if it is to protest the NFL's halftime show, all it is a glorified talent show. That really is what it is. And it's not a slight at all. It's just kind of like objective reality, right? The fact that you're that sensitive, that you have to go and create this spectacle just so that you can protest whatever it is you're protesting, does not a legitimate halftime show make. I didn't see any of the Turning Point. I didn't see it in its entirety. I just saw clips of it online. And at best, it's a Midland talent show. Like, at best, it's some in Midland, some Odessa talent show that like couldn't get off the ground, that had like I mean, it was laughable. But I think I have a problem with the terminology. Alternative halftime show. It wasn't. It was an alternative halftime show. And if you're part of the people that are sensitive enough, that are provoked enough by your own online echo chamber to turn off the regular Super Bowl halftime show just so that you can turn on a different alternative halftime show, then one, that's your prerogative. But then two, I think you're the real victim here, because you don't have to turn on either. I only watched the halftime show live. I didn't care for the game at all. I never do. To the point I made about the Super Bowl halftime show being a spectacle, right? I think you're the real victim, because your online echo chamber convinced you that this is inherently political. And because you want to ride or die for your side, it tells you in your mind, I need to turn this off so that I can watch this one, because this one's the patriotic, the real American halftime show, which it already falls on his face when you realize that there's been halftime shows where there had been no Americans. There's been halftime show where like The Who played, and it was a British band. Like there's been plenty of halftime shows that didn't show the American exceptionalism the way that you feel or you've been sold on your own echo chamber. So I think you're the real victim, because I think the only thing that you are doing is adding money to the pockets of people that know that they've got you hooked, they've got you clawed in. It's a done deal. They're just gonna reel you in, and they're gonna convince you that anything that the NFL is doing is woke, right? Mind you, a couple of years back, you guys were the same people saying you shouldn't kneel at the national anthem, that it was un-American, that protesting the NFL in that way was un-American. Now, I know maybe it's a false equivalency, because on one hand, it's the national anthem, and on the other hand, you're just turning off a performance, right? But it's still a protest. It's still a protest that you're actively online engaging in for the sake of whatever it is that you're trying to win online, whatever fight you think you're having. It's for that, right? And my biggest quarrel with that entire dynamic is that I feel bad. I feel bad for you. Not only because there's racial undertones, there's racist undertones to a lot of these decisions. Not only because the talking points also are bigoted in nature, and you may or may not be aware of it because, again, you're stuck in your echo chamber. But I also think that part of the reason that I get sad is because you don't realize that you're making money to somebody else. Somebody else is making money off of you, rather. That's what I should say. People are using your eyes and your attention to make money, which is no different than any other time of the day, right? The only difference is that in this dynamic, Turning Point USA is using your eyes to tell you two things. One, that whatever it is that they're alternatively hosting is more American than the other, right? Which is going to keep pulling at the thread of what real America should be, which is problematic in nature because that in turn they're going to keep capitalizing on to keep you glued to your seat and watching Turning Point USA so you can keep watching Erica Kirk be happy that her husband's dead, floating around and dancing around all these pyrotechnics. And then secondly, they're going to turn that into you thinking that you have to vote a certain way, when in reality, none of these things are correlated whatsoever. The Super Bowl halftime show, either one of them, is not correlated to the decision that you need to make about your life when it comes to voting time. Because when it comes to voting time, what you need to be doing is, one, voting in local elections, hopefully, so that you can actively find the candidate that best helps you in the moment, in your life. And it should really have nothing to do with whatever echo chamber you're on or some culture war that may or may not be happening, right? It's absurd. And that's what really makes me sad. It makes me sad for everybody that did that, because you're caught in a confirmation bias revolving door, and that makes me sad, right? I also think, on the other hand, it also influences the fact that now every musician is going to want to make political statements at a big spectacle like this, which I am for. But it doesn't matter who's making it. I am for people making that decision for whatever side that they're on, because that's what's American about that thing. That's the true American value, is that you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to put it forward. You're allowed to voice it. We're allowed to talk about it. So it doesn't matter if it's Morgan Wallen up there making some, dog whistle whatever, or if it's Bad Bunny talking about Puerto Rico. I'm okay with that. But I also think one influences the other. The more that we keep making things political, which again, it doesn't have to be, the more it's going to keep happening. And I think that's where we get caught in the revolving door. And then we end up, going back to my initial thought, then we end up on that 30,000 foot view question of, why are we comparing halftime shows to each other, and why are we then arguing about its political nature at the same time, mind you, that Pam Bondi is on the Senate floor or on these hearings floor actively defending pedophiles? Or rather, people on the Epstein list is what I should say. The president being number one. Like, that's where I find this to be like very meta hypocrisy. My second thought was that representation still matters, right? And the big irony in all of this is that I've been online I've been online and I've caught glimpses of people's conversations. And some of the conversations that pop up are inherently, well, look at the halftime show. There's not one white person in sight. Inclusion means that you're erasing us, right? I've seen that a couple times, which is a very, very loaded post designed to rile you up if you're white. And what I think initially when I read that is, weren't you guys upset a couple months back, couple years back about how representation, when we were screaming out representation, that it didn't matter, that it's not as important as you think? Now all of a sudden you don't see yourself on some spectacle, you don't see yourself represented on some spectacle, and you decide to go and create another one because you're that sensitive about it? All the while, we've never decided to try to make an alternative Super Bowl, an alternative halftime show. That seems silly to us, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But all of a sudden, what you're crying for is representation. So if I have some hopes, which I know this is a tall order, but if I had some hopes, if you are one of those people out there that has seen a post that resembles that and feel like gravitated towards it, I hope to God that instead of leaning on it and saying, oh, they're trying to erase me, I hope instead you say, maybe I should vote for policies, or maybe I should center my worldview amongst people that think that representation matters. Because if somebody is saying that representation doesn't matter, it's only about the way that I look, then you're inherently anti-representation. And you are only represent me at all costs, period, at the expense of everybody else. If you truly are feeling that representation matters, then I suggest you fight with us so that we can all be represented together, so that we can build the America, the United States that we have been told exists, that we're now seeing the veneer crack, right? That's what I urge of you. Instead of letting that rage bait, instead of letting that stir and say, no, you're trying to erase me, I would hope that you would then say, you know what? I think I should probably align myself with people that feel like representation matters because I want to feel represented. But this leads me to my last point. I decided to watch this through the perspective of my parents. And I realized that my parents have watched multiple Super Bowl halftime shows because they're not into football either. But they've watched it. They've watched plenty of other Americanized shows and or like spectacles, right? And never once have I ever heard my Latino, primarily Spanish-speaking parents say to me or to anybody else, I liked it, but I just wish that I was being represented. I like it, but I don't like it because I'm not represented. And look, this is what they're trying to sell you. They're trying to sell you this white American thing, and that means that they're never going to include us in there. I've never heard my parents talk negatively about the American experience in terms of culture ever. They have always watched every single thing that has been presented in front of them, and they have been able to look at it for what it was and been entertained for what it was, because even though they may not understand what they're saying, what Prince is saying, what Michael Jackson is saying, even though they've never been able to understand that, they can understand entertainment, they can understand emotion, they can understand art, and they can say to themselves, yes, maybe I don't see myself in this specific realm, in this specific stage, but it doesn't mean that I can't relate to the emotions that are being presented. It doesn't mean that I don't understand its function in the context that it's been given to me, and it doesn't mean that I don't exist because this exists. And to drive it back home to the original point and to the other points that I've made about the alternative halftime shows and the internet echo chambers, is this leads back to choices. You have a choice when you do things like this, when you watch things like this, when you experience things like this. You have a choice. When you're consuming media, you have a choice. A choice that you get to have complete control over. And the choice is, through which perspective are you going to choose to look at this from? You can look at Bad Bunny's halftime show and you can say to yourself, I'm being erased because Kendrick's last year didn't speak to me either. Or you can say, man, that was really entertaining. Those Latinas are bad. Maybe I should learn a little bit more about that culture. Maybe there's an America within America that I haven't been privy to, and this was a great insight because that looks super fun. I want to have fun with them. I want to be at a party like that. I want to understand what's happening. I want to understand these emotions. I should go and experience it. In the same way that I will tell Latinos, go two-stepping, go line dancing, which I actually know plenty of Latinos and Latinas that love line dancing, right? Because what do they say to themselves inherently? I can't see myself in that culture, even though, mind you, cowboy culture comes from Mexico. So I'm not sitting here saying stop appropriating my culture. I say to you, go and experience it. Go and see what that is like. Go and see what it's like to go to a dive bar that has line dancing and experience the fun that you can have in those spaces should they let you in. Because it's important for you to realize the diversity of what these places have to offer. And that, I think, is the superpower of the immigrant. That, I think, is the superpower of Latinos. And that, I think, is the ultimate lesson that I think people can learn from. And I think that people, especially on the other political side, on the people that turned the halftime show off to watch the talent show, that's what you can learn. Why not instead say, man, that was really fun, and I have no idea what they were saying, but I kind of want to see. It didn't look like they were trying to get mad at me. It didn't look like they were trying to, they weren't actively saying white people are bad. So like, maybe I should participate. Maybe I should make some friends. Ask some questions. And maybe learn something about an experience. That's the choice that you have to make. I find myself at a crossroads sometimes in moments like this because I say to myself, I'm not sure why I'm up in arms about a halftime show. And when I peel back the layers, I look around and I'm like, oh man, a lot of people are getting taken advantage of. Their attention is being weaponized. And maybe I'm hypocritical. I'm fighting for your attention too, right? But my message is very different. In the lifespan of this video, yes, you've heard me call that the Turning Point halftime show silly, but then you have also said, guys, we could be better than this, and we can all work together to understand each other's perspectives, which I don't think they're doing over there, right? Whenever they feel like they're misrepresented or they're not represented at all, they decide to say, no, let's kick everybody out. Whereas we decide, no, let's all represent each other in whatever way we can. Let's include ourselves. Let's have diversity and inclusivity. Just a thought. Penny for your thoughts. I was going to play a couple clips from the halftime show. I got everything ready, but then I just kind of got into a whole spiel. So maybe I can have a separate video where I actually watched the video and I tell you in real time what I was thinking. But these are my just afterthoughts about the Super Bowl halftime show in general and how maybe we could be better as a society. A societal critique. Let's call it that. Until next time. Deuces. Peace.